She thought the cameras were capturing a love story. What they were actually recording, according to multiple insiders, was a slow-motion setup. The kind where one party already knows the ending, and the other is walking straight into a legal ambush. Jasmine Pineda had no clue that while she was smiling on camera, crying through confessional therapy sessions, and pouring her heart out to producers, Gino had allegedly filed a $70,000 civil lawsuit against her. Not after filming, not after a breakup, during shooting. While they were still pretending to work on reconciliation scenes and talking baby names. He didn't tell her. TLC reportedly didn't tell her. And no one stepped in when that ticking bomb beneath her visa status started counting down. Welcome to Reality Sport. I'm Oliva. If this makes you mad already, tap subscribe and sound off in the comments. Was this sabotage or strategy? The moment Jasmine found out, it wasn't from a producer. It wasn't on set. It wasn't even from Gino. In a move that will never make it into bloopers or bonus footage, Jasmine reportedly learned from an outside contact, someone not even tied to the show, that she'd been sued. Sued while filming scenes about starting a family. Sued while being framed as the unstable one. Sued while trusting that everyone behind the cameras had her back. Even if her storyline was messy, the lawsuit allegedly accused her of financial damages, media-related misconduct, and contractual violations tied to their shared appearances. But the legal file wasn't the only thing that cracked her trust. It was the silence, the secrecy, the fact that no one gave her a heads up, not even a whisper, while she was legally exposed. And what happened during that off-camera breakdown left the entire crew in total silence. She showed up on what was scheduled to be a low-key interview day. Just standard B-roll, soundbite pickups, and maybe a follow-up reaction to another cast member's drama. But by then, Jasmine had confirmed the lawsuit was real. And the moment she stepped on set, something broke. Not on camera this time. Inside her. Multiple witnesses say she didn't come in angry. She came in confused, quiet, cold, eyes already red. She cornered a producer privately, behind the scenes. Voices escalated. Security was eventually called in, and when she spotted someone from the legal team, she reportedly screamed the question that still hangs over this entire story. Why did nobody tell me? That moment was never filmed, or if it was, it may never see daylight. People who were there claim production went into full shutdown mode. Cameras were turned off, staff devices confiscated, phones sealed in lockboxes. What started as Jasmine demanding answers allegedly spiraled into her accusing producers of exploiting her trauma for drama. That her fear, her immigration status, and her mental health were all part of the content plan. That they'd rather capture her falling apart than help her keep it together. Things moved fast after that. Jasmine left the shoot in tears. She hasn't been seen on a single frame of new TLC content since. No promo campaigns, no goodbyes, nothing. And now, she was facing something worse than heartbreak. Legal consequences. Possibly deportation. All built on secrets she wasn't supposed to know until it was too late. But here's where you're going to ask. Why would a network known for international love stories let one of their stars walk off set emotionally destroyed? With no protection? No lawyer? No preparation? That question leads you deeper. Because Jasmine wasn't walking out of a drama set that day. She was walking straight into real crisis. And someone may have let it happen. Or planned for it to. She didn't get a goodbye. Not on screen. Not online, not even in a quiet press release. One episode, she's crying on the couch, trying to piece her immigration forms together. And the next, she's gone. No closure, no mention. TLC acted like Jasmine Pineda never existed. Fans noticed. Social media threads blew up with theories. Did Jasmine leave voluntarily? Did Gino dump her off camera? Was she in Panama? Was she banned from coming back? The silence became its own kind of answer, And it wasn't by accident, because rewind just a few months, and Jasmine was everywhere. Face friend on TV spots, thumbnail star on YouTube trailers, a guaranteed ratings trigger every time her voice cracked or her moods snapped out of thin air. But once that final tear-soaked conversation turned real, not scripted, production pulled the plug. But they didn't just cut her. They reshaped her. On reruns and re-uploads, fans began noticing something strange. Jasmine's confessionals started to feel off. Clipped. Missing the context that made her reactions make sense. Emotional beats cut short. Moments where she opened up now looked more erratic than vulnerable. Whole sequences trimmed or reordered. And the camera angles started favoring Gino. He, who once symbolized passive confusion and awkward silences, suddenly looked composed. Protective. The confused husband rather than the calculating one. Because only after she vanished from your screen, Jasmine started seeing who was really pulling the strings. Reality TV doesn't delete people in one shot. First, it dilutes their presence. Then, it re-edits their legacy. Producers didn't just remove future plans with Jasmine, they blurred the past. Pacing changes. Music cues softening scenes that originally felt explosive. Removing her explanations or cutting away before her full point landed. That kind of edit isn't lazy. It's deliberate. Why? Because the easiest way to kill someone's credibility in reality television is to never say they're lying. But to rerun their truth so out of sequence, it no longer makes sense. This isn't conspiracy, it's practice. Reality shows aren't bound to fairness. They're bound to narrative arcs. And by erasing Jasmine without explanation, TLC didn't just silence her. They leveraged public confusion into plausible deniability. If she looked off on camera, the network never had to explain why she wasn't coming back. Because suddenly, Jasmine didn't appear as a woman unraveling under pressure from hidden lawsuits and crumbling immigration options. She looked like someone who just snapped. It blurred whether her reactions were real or just more instability for the camera. Even though the off-camera legal chaos was a skeleton in the room, the rerun edits focused on her as the unstable element, not the one being destabilized. Meanwhile, Gino stayed. Quiet. Consistent. No lawsuits mentioned. Never once answered for what viewers weren't allowed to see. Suddenly, he was marketable again. So, was this reediting strategy or damage control? And how much does TLC shape character arcs after stars lose their contracts? If a personality threatens the network's image, do they get removed or rewritten? That's where Jasmine re-enters this story. Not as a chaotic ex, but as someone who started compiling everything she was once too trusting to question. Messages. Audio. Emails. Internal notes she kept but never read closely. Until now. And that's reportedly when TLC itself started to get nervous. Because deleting someone on screen is easy. But if they have proof you knew more than you let show, deletion might not be enough. The real trouble didn't begin the day TLC cut Jasmine from the narrative. It began the moment she realized they'd already been rewriting it. From the inside. The lawsuit wasn't just messy. It was strategic. Allegedly filed by Gino for $70,000 in financial damages, the case centered around money he claimed to have lost or been manipulated into spending through their shared media appearances and relationship. And yet, not a single scene in the entire season even hinted at it. Not once did producers ask him about it on camera, even though, according to multiple insiders, they already knew. He never told Jasmine. The show never acknowledged it. But all of them kept filming, as if trust was still a plot point worth acting out. This wasn't some petty post-breakup jab. This was a move with real consequences. For an American citizen, a civil suit is paperwork. For a foreign national still figuring out immigration status while microphones are clipped to their chest, it's a landmine with a silent timer. And that's what stings even more. Jasmine, who reportedly asked repeatedly about her legal standing while filming, was reassured. Sources say she believed the production was aware, involved, even helpful, or at least had her best interests in mind. If legal issues were bubbling up off camera, she expected to be warned. Instead, she was given lines. Think about it. While a lawsuit quietly moved through a U.S. court, Jasmine was being filmed talking about wedding dresses, job plans, childcare ideas, scenes that TLC rolled out as hopeful reconciliation, while one half of the couple had already legally declared the relationship damaged beyond repair. There are no criminal charges connected to this suit. Nothing violent. Nothing explosive. But timing is everything. And in this case, allegedly, the timing was the knife. Because producers didn't just ignore signs of legal fallout, they leaned into romance while legal war had already started. That's no longer personal drama. That's potential ethical exposure. Because once legal pressure gets baked into entertainment, the line between storyline and survival starts fading. Some source accounts say the lawsuit was quietly filed weeks before Jasmine found out. Others claim documents were circulated internally, including in emails about how to manage her screen time emotionally. Was it handled like a risk? Or like clickbait? What matters most is this. Even if TLC didn't initiate the lawsuit, they apparently filmed through it. Some insiders allege they flagged it, but not to Jasmine. Instead, internal teams were reportedly told to keep filming, to focus on Gino's reactions, to stay away from legal specifics, unless it could be used later. Viewers saw Jasmine flip out at times, emotional outbursts that were edited as volatility. What never made it to air was the underlying dread these sources claim she was quietly managing, worries about her immigration paperwork, signs Gino was becoming distant and evasive, weird production delays, withheld documentation. And when she finally pieced it together, after confirming the lawsuit through a back channel, Jasmine brought the receipts, screenshots, messages, time-stamped production notes, stuff she wasn't meant to have, but saved anyway. That confrontation, reportedly, never made it to air. But behind locked studio walls, it sent shockwaves. Jasmine wasn't asking for sympathy. She was asking for the truth, for someone in charge to admit that the storyline had been broken the second the case was filed. She spoke up. They shut it down. But one question still echoes across every edit and every rerun they still air without her voice in it. If she had the proof, why didn't anyone listen? It started like any other shoot day. Jasmine was called in for a standard confessional pickup. One of those bland setups where producers ask follow-up questions so they can splice tearful reactions into future episodes. She was scheduled to be on set for 3 hours. She didn't even make it through the first 15. Witnesses say she walked in calm, but cold. Not her usual hyper-emotional self, not her chaotic camera-ready energy. Quiet. Focused. She wasn't here to film. She was here for answers. She already knew about the lawsuit by then, from someone she trusted outside the production. And not only did she confirm it, she reportedly walked in with printed documents and screenshots from the court filing. Her words weren't guesses. They were backed. An entire narrative had been staged around her while she was unknowingly balancing on a legal cliff. And now she was staring down the people who handed her the script. According to multiple insiders, Jasmine asked to speak to one of the senior producers alone. She got loud, refused to get back in front of the camera, accused the showrunners of hiding something that could have dragged her into immigration trouble. She repeated one question again and again, until her voice cracked. Why did no one tell me? The confrontation moved fast. A junior staff member texted security. Cameras were shut down. Phones were confiscated. Some of the crew were reportedly ordered out of the room completely. TLC lawyers showed up less than an hour later. Jasmine was escorted out, crying, angry, devastated, but this time off camera. And not because the scene didn't matter, but because it mattered too much. And the most damning part? One line in a leaked producer chat that said, "She'll peak at the right time." That day, everything shifted. Not on TV. Behind the scenes. Producers spun into containment mode. According to ex-staffers, certain names were wiped from production documents. Jasmine's call sheets vanished. Segment outlines were combed for anything legally sensitive. Internal server access was revoked for multiple freelance editors. It wasn't a cleanup, it was a lockdown. One assistant producer later told a journalist, under anonymity, that drama on set wasn't a glitch in the system, it was part of the narrative model. When cast members have meltdowns, they said, "We don't solve them, we schedule around them." Or better yet, we film them. But Jasmine's wasn't the type of breakdown that could play well in reruns. It wasn't an outburst that could be reused next season. This was legal. This had receipts. And it reportedly made people at TLC scramble harder than they ever had before. To understand the panic, you have to understand what happens when reality TV stops looking like entertainment and starts looking like evidence. Producers aren't required to alert cast members of every off-screen move that affects them. TLC didn't file the lawsuit against Jasmine. Gino did, and technically, the network had no obligation to inform her. No legal fault in staying quiet. But morally? That's a much messier edit, because right up until Jasmine snapped, she was being filmed making promises about a future that producing staff knew would likely never happen. Not because of ratings issues, but because one half of the couple had already taken legal action against the other. And there's no 90-day storyline strong enough to patch over betrayal that real. The worst part? Behind the scenes, people allegedly joked about the timing. Multiple sources claim planning memos referenced Jasmine's emotional arc, predicting where she'd hit her most dramatic points. That she was being guided, subtly and consistently, toward maximum emotional exposure, while no one bothered to tell her she was also heading toward legal ruin. It wasn't until Jasmine left production for good that emails started surfacing. Not leaked from inside TLC, pulled from Jasmine's own inbox. Old messages she had saved without quite realizing what they meant. Language that described her visa situation as controllable. Notes comparing her vulnerability to episode pacing. Snippets of producer texts discussing how long it might take for her trust in Gino to wear thin. These weren't episode outlines. They were strategy boards. And they weren't drafts. They looked finished. So, ask yourself, when documenting someone's relationship, career, and mental health, where exactly is the line between dramatic storytelling and emotional engineering? Because if Jasmine's breakdown wasn't just captured, but predicted, then the camera crew wasn't following her story. They were conducting it. They didn't arrest her with sirens or handcuffs. There was no public courtroom scandal, no mugshot, no expos on primetime. It happened quietly, but not privately. Jasmine was detained during what sources confirm was standard immigration processing triggered by her legal entanglement with the lawsuit. It wasn't criminal. It was procedural. But that didn't make it any less humiliating. She didn't know the civil suit could set off a domino effect. But once her court appearance intersected with paperwork tied to her visa, immigration services reportedly flagged inconsistencies in her status. And because her legal position was already shaky, something TLC sources claim had been known but downplayed, she was placed under review, held, and scheduled for removal. Hours turned into days. According to people close to her, Jasmine had no team, no representative from the show, no response from the network. The same producers who once texted her daily for realness on camera now weren't answering her calls. She was alone, frozen in a system she didn't fully understand, in a language she wasn't fully confident navigating. Her family back in Panama reportedly only found out when she managed a brief call from processing. The stress, the shame, the complete silence from everyone she'd once trusted while filming in America was described by a friend as the final gut punch in a story already packed with them. And here's what hits harder. Jasmine allegedly left the country believing TLC would step in. That someone, anyone, on that end would offer help. After all, she had been told repeatedly by more than one producer that her immigration-related concerns were under control. That if anything major happened, she'd be informed. That everything being shot on set had been vetted. But former cast members have since backed her up. Several others have said they too were verbally assured certain protections or reassurances during sensitive episodes, and those promises never materialized on paper. No formal legal support, no liability, just enough comfort to keep filming. For American reality stars, a lawsuit is a discomfort. For foreign talent, it's a trapdoor. Once civil litigation intersects with immigration, it stops being a storyline. It becomes a deadline. And for some, there's no exit strategy, just a quiet flight home, with nothing to show for months of exposure but former viewers asking why you're suddenly missing from last night's episode. Because while Jasmine was silenced, edited, and deported, her episodes were still getting streamed, monetized, and reshared. That's the part no one wants to talk about. While Jasmine was being processed for removal, fan pages were reposting clips of her crying. While she was figuring out her next steps back in Panama, old scenes of her and Gino were racking up views on YouTube and Discovery Plus. Not only was she edited out in the present, she was still earning the network money in the past. So, ask the uncomfortable question. If TLC knew she was in legal jeopardy and had filmed through it anyway, then responded with silence after deportation, shouldn't they have, at the very least, pulled her episodes? They didn't. There was no public apology, no network statement, no update to fans. Gino stayed visible. Jasmine did not. But the cameras never really stopped airing what they'd taken from her. Some staff reportedly pushed back privately, said the optics would be bad, that monetizing segments from someone who had just been deported on a technicality tied to production silence was cruel. But the machine kept going. And no one, not TLC, not Gino, not a single senior producer, has confirmed whether Jasmine's legal and immigration risks were even brought up in meetings. What has appeared, however, is consistent. Streaming numbers don't dip. Ad revenue doesn't pause. Drama sells, even if the star disappears mid-season. TLC hasn't said a word about Jasmine's removal. But their silence says plenty, especially when paired with streaming metrics that show her face still generates clicks, even after she was flown out of the country she thought she was building a life in. He's still there, quietly, casually, sitting in interviews with a slightly more polished shirt, a more sympathetic edit, and a sanitized storyline. Gino didn't go anywhere. No lawsuit mention, no fallout montage, no behind-the-scenes accountability arc, just business as usual. That's the part that makes people pause. Jasmine is gone without warning, erased mid-narrative, while Gino stays securely in the fold, untouched, unchallenged, and, if you trust insider whispers, gently rebranded. Because the version of Gino we see now isn't the same one who once fumbled his way through awkward phone calls and explosive fights. The current version carries more complexity, softer lighting, fewer confrontations. His reactions seem grounded, measured. The kind of guy reality TV loves when the storyline needs a survivor. So ask yourself, how does someone involved in legal drama, allegedly serious enough to jeopardize a co-star's immigration status, get to remain on air with no public explanation? TLC hasn't addressed the lawsuit. They haven't addressed Jasmine's deportation. But Gino? He's still on set. On the surface, that might look normal. But when you scratch the edit, the changes become obvious. Scenes that once showed Gino losing composure now cut away sooner. Confessions that hinted at conflict are reframed with context about stress, tension, or vague production pressure. His storyline was softened like a PR rollout in real time. This isn't new for reality TV. Industry vets have long pointed out the pattern. Cast members from the US are far more likely to remain on shows after major controversy, while foreign participants, especially if they're women, seem to vanish with little notice. No closure. No return, because if what Jasmine claims is backed by even half the screenshots insiders say she has, someone made a mistake. A big one. Reality TV doesn't just capture your behavior. It distills it. And then it decides what to do with your emotional weight. Gino's edit started changing around the same time Jasmine began missing from content. That's not coincidence. That's construction. Critics in the industry call this emotional economy. It's not about truth, it's about function. You keep the character who can still carry storylines. You delete the one who might cost too much in legal fallout, or who's starting to gain sympathy they weren't supposed to have. Gino became useful again. Jasmine became a liability. So post-production recalibrated, reframed, preserved him, edited her out. Let's be honest, Gino isn't known for charisma. His original appeal rested on awkwardness. But now, he's positioned as someone who tried. And Jasmine, in reruns and recaps, has been shaved into the role of the unstable ex. It's subtle. Fewer full shots of her in one-on-one settings. Split screen edits instead of direct reaction cuts. Removing her from thumbnails. Replacing her image with generic B-roll. For a network that built its success on emotional transparency, they're careful what they replay and who gets replayed. The edit becomes the narrative, and the narrative becomes reality. At least to viewers who miss the legal developments happening off-camera. Meanwhile, Jasmine isn't silent anymore. She's been quietly rebuilding, gathering documentation, reaching out to former crew, syncing timelines, finding correlation between what happened in the edits versus what actually unfolded in real life. And if what sources claim is true, she's sitting on receipts that don't just detail her own mistreatment, but decisions made internally that contradict TLC's public face. Emails, messages, clips, possibly even pre-edit logs that show when Gino's image began being styled differently, after certain incidents never aired. And here's where it gets sharp. If Jasmine's claims have trailable timestamps and align with her legal claims, those internal discussions could shift the entire framing of the show's accountability, especially if there's documentation suggesting TLC leaned into her breakdown while knowing she was at risk. That goes beyond bad editing. That becomes deliberate image shaping. Some defenders of Gino argue he wasn't responsible for Jasmine's deportation, and legally, that might be true. But silence after action is still a form of positioning, and both he and the network have benefited from her absence. The show's ratings haven't dipped. The newer seasons moved on. Brand deals remained intact. But Jasmine? She's still picking up the pieces, off camera, off contract, but not off record. What's more, some insiders say she's now in talks with media lawyers, not to sue just yet, but to clarify what kind of agreements were made verbally versus what was left out of her contract. Because uneven power dynamics don't always collapse on camera. Sometimes they fall apart in the editing bay. It's worth asking, if what Jasmine has proves that internal producers discussed her trajectory in advance of her off-screen breakdown, down to the timing of her meltdowns and what could air when, how much of that reality was edited, and how much was orchestrated? Right now, TLC's best weapon is silence. But Jasmine's best asset? Time and memory. Not emotional memory, documented memory. Because unlike what TLC shows you weekly, Jasmine hasn't forgotten a single thing. She has it, saved, archived, watermarked. And if she chooses to drop even a fraction of what she's compiled, the edits they depended on to protect Gino, not just from backlash, but from context, might unravel publicly. What does Jasmine know now that could scare an entire legal department into going into quiet mode? If you follow the logic and timeline closely, it might not be one big piece. It could be dozens of small ones that all line up too perfectly, too efficiently. Because post-production isn't where the story ends. It's where the truth either gets buried or exposed. When the lights went out and the cameras stopped rolling, most assumed Jasmine Pineda would fade out like every other reality TV upset, deleted scenes, broken hearts, and a whisper of drama that never really resolves. Instead, she began doing something no one expected. She started collecting phone numbers of former crew members, emails she thought were harmless at the time, copies of production messages, screenshots of conversations she hadn't read twice during filming because she was too busy staying in character, too trusting of people wearing TLC badges and smiling through chaos. But this time, she read everything with new eyes. What she allegedly started uncovering wasn't just communication, it was a pattern. Words like controlled escalation and story containment kept cropping up in producer exchanges, in segment notes. Sometimes in harmless check-ins like, keep close on Jasmine today, she's showing signs of a peak. Other times, in more alarming language, words that hinted her breakdown wasn't an accident. Her collapse wasn't unexpected. It was, allegedly, used to close arcs. This wasn't about a love story anymore. It was about content. Jasmine, confused by how fast everything collapsed and how silent everyone became, realized something else. Many of those protections she thought she had, as a foreign guest, as a non-citizen, as someone on an entertainment visa, were never actually written down. She'd received verbal promises from field producers. Lines like, "Don't worry, we're watching that," or "We'll step in if anything serious feels off." But they always came during active filming, during emotionally high-stakes scenes, and always spoken, never signed. To her, they sounded like real safety nets. To the production, they were just encouragement to keep her in the moment. Because if she publishes the full email threads, this franchise will never look the same. The truth is, most foreign cast members come into shows like this believing what they're told. Not because they're unaware, but because trust builds fast in emotionally extreme environments. And the person holding the boom mic or calling for reshoots doesn't seem like a legal threat. They seem like the only people who understand what you're dealing with in real time. Several former 90-day cast members, now off contract, have quietly expressed support for Jasmine. Some say they experienced similar dynamics, producers telling them, empathetically but firmly, that everything will be fine during breakdowns, or you're safe, as long as they keep revealing personal trauma or confessing mid-scene regret for the camera. One former cast member said in a voice note shared with Jasmine, "They know you're scared, and they make you feel seen. But it's not protection. It's permission. They're getting you to sign off emotionally before you've had time to breathe." That line cut deep. Jasmine replayed it, reportedly, dozens of times. The problem is, using emotional leverage as a placeholder for actual legal protection isn't just manipulative, it's culturally dangerous, especially when one side has lawyers, contracts, and media power, while the other side is working through a second language, unfamiliar laws, and the risk of being deported, not for crime, but for being caught in the middle of something they never agreed to frame as drama. Critics have started calling it what it is: cultural gaslighting. The encouragement of emotional exposure without the support system to survive it. And when foreign women of color, like Jasmine, are praised for their vulnerability on screen, but left discarded off it, you have to ask what the emotional transaction really costs. Legally, Jasmine's path is complicated. Proving emotional distress as a post-reality TV claim is uphill, even with documentation. Networks argue editing is part of the job. Anyone who agrees to be filmed consents to selective presentation. But proving intent, that's where things get technical. If emails or production notes show producers waited for a breakdown, or discussed how long it might take before a cast member collapsed during visa uncertainty, Jasmine's argument shifts from emotional to strategic negligence. She's not there yet. But the conversation has already moved. Reddit threads are piecing things together. Former crew are watching their old messaging logs more carefully. Entertainment lawyers are aware. And TLC's silence is not creating distance, it's creating suspicion. No one knows exactly what Jasmine plans to release. But she is preparing something. That much, multiple sources confirm. She's working slowly because every thread matters. She has to be accurate. Her only weapon left is truth. Her only defense is what she saved when she was still being told everything was under control. And, privately, she's reaching back out to those who stood beside her during the seasons she now views with skepticism. The ones who saw her cry for things bigger than love. The ones who said she was a lot on set, but also were the first to gently ask if she was being looked after properly. Even they didn't know how far it would go. And neither did TLC. Jasmine wasn't supposed to become a question mark after her exit. She was supposed to be noise, forgotten in reruns. Now she's a liability, and she still hasn't spoken formally. Nothing viral yet. No exclusive interviews. No lawsuit, but no denials. Either. But the clock is ticking. For TLC, for Gino, and for the version of her story they thought they could just edit into silence. Behind every glossy reunion special and every messy tell-all, there's a group of people you never see. The crew who watched everything unfold from the shadows. Some of them held cameras. Some of them managed schedules. Some of them kept cast members calm in bathrooms between takes. And almost all of them have one thing in common. They are scared to talk. Former crew who have spoken off the record say the quiet part out loud. Silence isn't loyalty. It's survival. You don't challenge the system if you want to keep working. You don't question why nobody warned Jasmine about a lawsuit. You don't ask who decided to cut her out of promos. You don't push back when a meltdown is flagged as good content. You stay small. You collect your paycheck. You hope your name doesn't get attached to anything messy. Because in reality TV, the blacklist is very real. Challenge a producer. Disappear from future call sheets. Mention concerns about mental health. Get labeled difficult to work with. Ask one question too many about legal exposure for a foreign cast member, and someone else fills your spot on the next season. This fear culture protects the machine, not the people. That's why so many insider comments you hear about Jasmine are anonymous. A former producer. A staff member who requested not to be named. It's not because they enjoy secrecy. It's because NDAs and back-channel warnings hang over their heads like a constant threat. Contracts in this industry aren't just about stopping spoilers. They're used as walls. Non-disclosure agreements are drafted broadly. They don't only prevent plot leaks. They chill discussion of process, too. If a producer admits they watched Jasmine mentally spiral while also tracking her reactions for story beats, talking about that later can be framed as disparagement or confidential material. So, of course, most cast members stay quiet. Even if they felt used. Even if they felt misled. Even if they wonder whether their tears were real while the care behind the scenes was not. Because hidden in the legal fine print is the unspoken rule, we own the footage. We own the narrative. And if you question us publicly, we might not win in public opinion, but we have more lawyers than you do. Because when someone has nothing left to lose, they usually don't go public for views. They go public for the truth. This is where Jasmine's situation hits a different nerve. She doesn't have another U.S. reality show to protect. She doesn't have a future with the network to bargain for. She doesn't live in the same legal environment as the people she's accusing. In some ways, that makes her vulnerable. In others, it makes her free. If she speaks, it will not be for clout. It will be to correct a story everyone else has already cashed in on. But let's be fair. There is a counter-argument here. Reality TV is chaotic by nature. Producers don't write scripts. They react to real behavior in real time. If a cast member has an outburst or meltdown, is that not fair game for television? If you signed up to be filmed, gave consent, and knew there would be drama, can you complain later when your worst moments end up in trailers? That is the industry's favorite defense. And it sounds logical until you look closer at power. Yes, reality TV is unscripted. But the structure around it is not. Editing, pacing, selective storytelling, withholding context, those parts are fully controlled. And when you have a legal department reading every contract, but almost no legal support for the people on camera, the line between fair game and exploitation stops being philosophical. It becomes measurable. If you tell someone we've got your back but never put it in writing, you aren't protecting them. You're managing them. If you know someone's immigration status could be put at risk by off-camera legal action and you say nothing, you're not neutral. You're choosing profit over precaution. The ethical question is simple, even if the legal one isn't. Does money excuse creating loopholes to avoid accountability? Does a network earn the right to keep broadcasting a person's pain after they've been deported? If that person feels the same network helped push them toward that outcome? Some viewers shrug. They signed up for it. But did they sign up to be kept in the dark about lawsuits filed behind their backs? Did they sign up to have their status used as emotional ammunition? Did they sign up to be quietly cut the moment they became inconvenient, while still being used as a face to sell old episodes? Ask any producer off camera how they talk about big moments. They don't say trauma, they say gold. They don't say collapse, they say peak. It sounds harmless in the control room, but to the person whose life sits on that peak, it is everything. That's why Jasmine's silence feels different. It isn't the silence of fear, it's the silence of preparation. She doesn't need a press conference to prove what happened. She doesn't need a major outlet to validate her story. Every scene removed without explanation is already doing that for her. Every fan who asks where did she go applies pressure. Every former crew member who quietly admits, yeah, we saw things that didn't feel right, adds weight. The edits that tried to erase her ended up circling back as evidence that she was important enough to hide. Jasmine's story doesn't rely on TLC's response. It doesn't wait for Gino's confession. It is already visible in the gaps, the silences, the missing commentary. The way the show quickly shifted tone and never looked back. Her power now is not in what she films. It's in what she kept. And in how the network reacts, or refuses to react, once she decides to speak. Jasmine Pineda might never sit in a TLC interview chair again, with a ring light in her face and a producer off to the side asking, "So, how do you feel right now?" And honestly, that might be the best thing that ever happened to her. Because at this point, stepping back onto those sets wouldn't fix anything. The damage is already done. The contract's expired. The storylines have moved on. But the impact she left behind, especially behind the scenes, is only starting to show. People inside the machine are nervous. You can feel it in how the newer seasons are cut. The tone from producers in leaked messages has changed. More careful. Less cocky. Casting recruiters, according to a few insiders, are suddenly more cautious when approaching foreign cast members. Where they once leaned on charm and vague reassurances, now they hear sharper questions. What kind of legal support do you offer? Will anyone from the network help if immigration gets involved? Do you warn cast when a partner takes legal action off camera? These aren't celebrity-level demands. These are survival questions. And they didn't appear out of nowhere. They came from stories like Jasmine's. The industry might pretend she is gone, but the wake she left is clear. Future Jasmines are starting to think twice. Some will still sign because fame is a powerful pull, and the promise of a visa through love feels like a fantasy worth chasing. But others will read a few more Reddit threads, watch a few more commentary videos, ask a few more cast alumni what really happens between takes. Some will walk away. And for a franchise built on the idea that vulnerable people will always line up to be filmed, even a small drop in trust hurts. The funniest part, in a dark way, is that Jasmine never set out to be some symbol. She wasn't trying to blow up a system or become a whistleblower. She fell in love in a messy, explosive, often embarrassing way, like half the people on that show. She wanted her shot at the fairy tale, the house, the papers, the happily ever after. What she ended up chasing now isn't status. It's acknowledgement, not a bigger platform, a simple apology. By all accounts from people close to her, Jasmine doesn't sit around dreaming of a comeback. She's not sending secret emails begging TLC to bring her back. She's not trying to get rehired. She doesn't want a spin-off. What she wants is someone, somewhere in that chain of decision makers, to own what happened. To say out loud that yes, they knew more than they admitted at the time, that she deserved to be warned when a lawsuit was filed behind her back, that using her fear for ratings, then leaving her unsupported in the fallout, was wrong. She is not begging for screen time. She is asking for respect. But here's the twist that still stings. While she sits with that, rebuilding quietly in Panama, guessing what step to take next, one fact remains unchanged. Gino is still under contract. Jasmine is not. He still has access to the machine. Future appearances. Potential special episodes. Royalty-based payouts when old content replays. He remains a brand asset. She is simply back catalog. Their stories started together and ended in total imbalance. The American partner preserved, the foreign partner cut. One considered usable, the other considered expendable. And yet, this stopped being about airtime a long time ago. TLC can keep Gino's storyline alive as long as they want. They can reframe him 12 different ways. They can let him walk through more spin-off seasons. None of that changes the fact that when people search Jasmine's name now, they are not only seeing TLC's edits, they are seeing questions, they are seeing commentary, they are seeing threads that pull at the seams of carefully built narratives. Her legacy isn't in the screaming matches. It isn't in the messy hotel scenes or the confessionals cut to make her look unhinged. Her legacy lies in the discomfort her story now creates for the people who work on and watch these shows. Because once you understand how quickly someone can be deleted, you never watch reality TV the same way again. You notice when one cast member stops getting confessionals. You notice when someone disappears mid-season without explanation. You notice when a messy storyline suddenly smooths out without a real resolution. You start wondering, did they leave? Or were they kept quiet? That shift in awareness is part of what Jasmine unintentionally built. She took the myth of all's fair in love and reality TV and put a crack in it. Now fans ask harder questions. Comment sections dissect contract language. Immigration lawyers are invited on podcasts. Producers who used to be invisible are now subjects of scrutiny. TLC might ignore all of it publicly, but privately, they would be foolish not to feel the walls inching closer. And if Jasmine releases everything she has collected, the emails, notes, messages, and time-stamped evidence she's been quietly organizing, the conversation moves from speculation to documentation. from gossip to history. Her story then stops being a one-off scandal and starts becoming a reference point, a case study new cast members show their families when they're deciding whether to sign, a warning label on what looks at first like a romantic opportunity, but can quickly become a legal battlefield dressed up as TV. Right now, Jasmine stands at a crossroads between legacy and leverage. Legacy means owning her story publicly, laying everything out, even if it risks more online hate or dismissal from people who still want to believe their favorite network can do no real harm, accepting that some viewers will call her dramatic, ungrateful, bitter, and still talking anyway. Leverage means holding back the full story until it is absolutely necessary, waiting for the moment pressure peaks, or for someone else inside the machine to slip and contradict the records she has. Using the evidence not only as her shield, but as her last card to play. Either way, one thing is sure. TLC no longer fully owns the narrative around Jasmine. They own footage. They own edits. But they do not own her memory. Her memory of what was said on set when mics were off. Her memory of what producers promised when the cameras were down. Her memory of who went quiet the second her situation stopped being entertaining and started being inconvenient. And long after the franchise moves on to new couples, new visas, new disasters, her shadow will linger over every contract put in front of another foreign fiancé. So, the real question now isn't whether Jasmine comes back to TV. It's who still profits from the image she left behind. Because her face still appears in thumbnails. Her tears still play in flashbacks. Her arguments still get clipped on fan channels. Money still moves every time someone streams the season she carried. Which raises one more uncomfortable question. The one I am saving for next time. If Jasmine has been cut off, silenced, and pushed aside, who is still earning money off her name and her pain? And how long do they think they can keep cashing in before she decides to show every receipt she has?